Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with my co-host, Jill Bucaro. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our third podcast for Guided by Third Wheel. Third podcast, third wheel. Maybe that's lucky. I don't know. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. So the first two episodes, Amber and I kind of shared a little bit about our stories, a lot professionally, a little bit personally, and just some of the things that we've kind of overcome, worked through, things that we're still struggling with. And what we heard from people who were listening is that a lot of that resonated. So what we want to do kind of in the next couple podcasts is to dive deeper into some of those topics. And I think the one we heard the most feedback about that was like, oh, wow, that felt not like a breakthrough, but what a cool way to frame that. That really made me think about my own experience was when we were talking about imposter syndrome. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to start, I think I'm going to ask Amber a couple questions and let her share a little bit about her experience, because I think just in our conversations, Amber struggles, or at least says that she struggles a little bit more with kind of the typical definition of imposter syndrome. Mine feels like a little bit weirder and more insidious. So we're going to start with Amber and just kind of hear about her experience. So Amber, tell us about imposter syndrome. Tell us about your experience with it.
All right. So first off, I went on my best friend here, Wikipedia, which we know is so accurate for all things.
Very accurate. Evidence-based.
Evidence-based, similar to a lot of things that we use. So imposter syndrome. So I looked this up and I just wanted to kind of give us a definition at the beginning, because when I read it, I was like, ooh, that kind of hit. So it says imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon or imposterism. So, I mean, imposterism sounds like a cool, roll off your tongue kind of word. So if you're like, I do not have imposter syndrome, I have imposterism.
Imposterism. It's got a nicer ring to it.
Yes, it sounds more polished.
Less syndrome-y, more polished. I like
Which is kind of part of the imposter syndrome, right? So, so it says it's a psychological occurrence in which people doubt their skills, their talents, or their accomplishments and have persistent internalized fear of being exposed as frauds. Despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing this phenomenon do not believe that they deserve their success. So, as we talked about in the last podcast, we kind of talked about imposter syndrome a little bit. And I found throughout my career, I've dealt with imposter syndrome on and off. And I think that it sneaks in for me whenever I am particularly new to doing something, but it's not always new to doing something. It's also new to doing something with a new group of people.
So the people around you matter for the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, because I find that when I get into a group of people, whether that's in a workplace or a friend group or a social group or something like that, once I'm in with them and we've kind of I can feel out where everyone sits, I guess, and everyone's talents and everybody's and I guess that's probably a protective mechanism, right? You want to sit back and make sure everyone is safe and all of that. But once I figured all of that out, I feel more competent about my own gifts, which doesn't make any sense because they were always there and fine.
Right.
And so, and even if I have people telling me Amber, you are doing a great job, or a new job. We hired you because you have all of these things, right? And they're giving me no reason to believe that I have any deficits or that they're seeing them. Internally, I'm still oh my God, they're going to find out. They're going to find out that I'm just full of shit. And it's not, it's I don't necessarily know that I believe that I'm full of shit, but I don't believe that I'm as good as they think that I am.
That's really interesting, because even when we were talking about imposter syndrome, little fun fact for you guys, Amber and I sit down for about I don't know, 90 seconds to 2 minutes and kind of brainstorm through the podcast. But we didn't even hit on the piece that you just brought up that is so obvious to me now that you've said it, is that our external situation matters. The people around us matter. And like clearly now, I realize from what you said that imposter syndrome is fostered when you don't feel safe.
Right.
An unsafe environment where you don't trust the people is going to make you have imposter syndrome. Because if you're surrounded by people who you know and trust and that you believe that they love you, you know that they see you,
right,
you're not going to have imposter syndrome. Because like with you, like we've been in business now 3 or 4 years together, 5 years, I don't know, however many years.
I think it's been 5.
5 years together.
We had to count.
I'm like 1 year, 7 years, who would know?
By going to the state website to see when our business was founded, that's how we had to count.
That is how you're right, and we did.
Why are we business owners? We don't know.
We don't know. And according to the Ohio Secretary of State, I think, yes, we have been in business about 5 years. And I mess up. Like sometimes like you'll text me like, hey Joe, we're supposed to meet today. And I'm like, oh, clearly I cannot meet right now. Like I totally missed that. But I don't feel like I am the world's most horrible business partner. I am unorganized. I am too forgetful, because you are safe. Like I know that you know that was a weird blip on the radar, that was a fluke.
Yes.
So yeah. So I think when we think about imposter syndrome and when we're starting to experience it, the first thing we have to ask ourselves, is this about me or is this about the people that are surrounding me?
Yeah.
Whew. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then what do you do with that?
Right.
What do you do with the fact that like you can't make everybody around you make you feel safe?
No.
So you have to create your own internal safety. And that's kind of, even going back to, doing the self-care workshops and doing our like energy retreats and stuff like that. It is all about like how internally can I create that resource for myself? Because not that we, like we're all humans and we want to have relationships with other people and like that's fulfilling, and we want people around us that make us feel safe and that love us and all of that, and we should have that. But at the end of the day, I need to know that if all of that falls away, if that changes for a minute, that I can hold on to myself as I find my new tribe.
Yes. And I think that is, for me at least, like that's where the work is consistently building and reinforcing that like internal strength. That like when you are always looking for your stability, your affirmation, reminder of your worth externally, that's when you crumble all the time.
Right.
But doing the work is about building that internally so that when you don't get the, accolades or validation that you thought you were going to get, when a person who you were really relying on to prop you up and to keep you emotionally okay leaves, goes away, something happens with that relationship, you're not crumbling every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting back to the imposter syndrome thing, if you are starting to feel those feelings come up, one, look around, and is it like, okay, am I not in a safe situation? Am I not surrounded by safe people? And to your point, you can't really, you can have conversations with people, right? And maybe that's something we can unpack later. But the biggest thing you can do is to start to build that internal strength and reinforcement.
Yeah. And to just kind of look at, I know for myself, like as I move through, and I have not put imposter syndrome to bed in any way, shape, or form. I told Jill, even yesterday, like I just had a moment of it and I was like, and I knew it. I knew it because I started thinking about this podcast and I was like, damn it, Amber, you did it again. You let it happen again. But I think that we need to, build that internal strength, but figure out ways that we can reassure ourselves that we are enough. And something that I do a lot when I like get into the spiral loop, because that's what happens. Like sometimes I just have like a little thought where I'm like, oh, Amber, you're not in the right place. Like this is not your place because, you're not smart enough. You don't have the credentials. You don't have the whatever. But what I try to remind myself always is, everyone else in this room is having similar feelings on some level, right?
Yes.
Everyone else in this room, even though like everybody presents differently as they're experiencing that, everyone else in this room has experienced feeling insecure, feeling like they don't belong.
Yes.
You know? And sometimes that kind of helps me to kind of pull it back down, especially when like I'm at work and I'm looking around a room and I'm seeing CEOs and I'm seeing, you know, major community leaders and stuff like that. And I mean, that can be very intimidating and make you feel like I don't belong here. Right?
Absolutely. You know, and it was interesting. We did our energy retreat last week, which was awesome and amazing. And it was kind of a smaller, intimate group of us, which I think made it a million times better. And you and I we knew everybody in the room, some like more than others, and some just kind of like adjacently, I would say. But, you know, I was participating. I was lucky I got to just participate in the energy retreat. Amber led it. And I felt like I kind of leaned in and participated and got kind of vulnerable. And what I thought was interesting is when I was sharing like just some of my shit, for lack of a better word, right? Like self-esteem stuff, feelings of unworthiness, right? Like feeling like I can never be enough or will never be enough. It was interesting, I think, to see some of these people who had never seen that side of me, right? Who saw me more of like, I don't know, like a leader or a mentor or something like that. It was interesting for me to like kind of see that on their faces, like this realization, like, oh, Jill feels that way too.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting reminder to me that like, I don't always need to like fake it all the time, right? That sometimes when you're in a leadership role or in a mentor role, like that vulnerability is important because you're showing, you know, people that might be struggling with the exact same things you are, that you can have all of that and, you know, deal with all of that and still be able to like be confident and put your best foot forward. I don't know if that makes sense, but I was really picking up specifically from one person, I think just some surprise like that, oh my gosh, Jill really feels this way sometimes. And it was a good reality check for me because it's like, man, Jill, maybe you're faking it a little bit too much, right? Maybe you need to let people see this, humanize yourself a little bit, right? Maybe that's a way to be more impactful in your work and in your relationship. So yeah, I think to your point, we really have to realize that most people are struggling with this, I think.
Yeah.
If not all people. I don't want to generalize for everybody, but I think probably a lot of people. And I think women too. I think we have to talk about that gender piece at some point too.
Yes. Yeah. I think for women it is, you know, and I've never been a man, so I don't know.
Same, me neither.
I don't know. I have no idea like what it is like, but I know for women, we not only have, you know, all of the normal things that come with just being a human being and feeling, you know, unworthy sometimes of things, all of the, you know, the things that we bring along from our childhood and our adolescence, young adult, you know, all the relationships we've ever been in, all the situations we've seen. But then we have this like bigger societal thing that's like, and also, we would like you to look this way, talk this way, act this way. You really should only have, you know, these types of positions. You know, sometimes we still live in a society where, you know, the majority of like higher leadership is male.
Yes.
And if they're not male, I've worked for a lot of female bosses that are extremely masculine and don't bring that feminine energy into the workplace. And that can sometimes be just as hard as, you know, having just all male leadership. I mean, at least you have the face of a female, but like the energy there is not the same. And so, and I think that's really important to understand that, like, because men have feminine energy too, but I feel like, you know, having that balance as a leader and being able to have that vulnerability, but then also being able to have that level of strength is so important.
Yes.
Because we should all be balanced, and if we are a leader, we can teach our team how to have that balance too, because that's where the burnout comes from. That, you know, hard masculine energy all the time, that drive, grind, that will lead to burnout.
Right. But don't you think that women and men just lean into that masculine energy, even if it doesn't feel authentic to them?
Yes.
Because that's what society has told us.
Yes.
This is what leadership looks like. This is what strength looks like, right? And it's kind of that belief that, you know, like power is a zero-sum game, right? If somebody else gets some, that inherently means you lose it.
You have less.
And I mean, I don't believe that to be true, but I think that's the overall like societal belief. And so I think what you see also that can lead to burnout is kind of what you touched on is people aren't being authentic. They're not embracing their energy. They're embracing like the energy and the traits and the characteristics that they think the world wants them to have.
Right.
Which really, I mean,
is the definition of the imposter.
Which is the definition of the imposter syndrome, that you don't think you as you are good enough.
Right.
So let me lean on these external things. Let me fake it till I make it. Amber always hates when I say that, because I don't believe that just being me is gonna cut it.
Yeah.
And then yes, that's what leads to the burnout.
Yeah.
Because you're not being you.
And I also think it's something that I've found that has helped a little bit with imposter syndrome is really being able to accept when people give you feedback and when they give you compliments. I'm better at it now. But I've not always been able to accept that. You know, when people would come to me and they'd be like, oh, you're doing a really good job at this, or, you know, I really appreciate the way that you handled this situation, or I really appreciate you as a friend, as a, you know, coworker or whatever. In my mind, it was like, that's nice, but what are you trying to get over on me? It was immediately like, you must be trying to manipulate me because that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not 100% true. And so first off, getting grounded in yourself, right? Because you have to know that you are inherently worthy, you know, of everything that you want, right? But as I get grounded in myself, I also need to be able to accept that feedback from other people, especially the positive feedback, because that helps me come out of that imposter syndrome. That helps me see how other people see me externally.
Yes. Like you have to take down that wall. You got to take down that barrier and lean into that compliment and lean into that positive feedback.
Yes.
Because I think like you, I'm so scared. Yes, they're manipulating me. They don't really mean it. They want something from me. They're just being nice so they can like use my hard work some more. So I keep the barrier up. But because the barrier's up, I never get like the true reinforcement and validation.
Yeah.
So you got to be brave enough to like let it down even just a little bit, right? So like let that compliment or that feedback sneak in. Because I think, when I think about that, I can almost like visualize, like people say something nice and it just like bounces right off my armor. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, thank you, you know? But yeah, I don't take it in.
Right. Right. Or the best is, you know, and a lot of people do this. You give them a compliment and they're like, oh, that was no big deal. No big deal.
Oh my God. Easy peasy. Yes.
Right. Instead of like just sitting there and honoring that moment with another person and saying, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, you know, sharing that with me. Right. And it's just that simple. When you say that, not only does it validate the other person to continue to share their feelings about how your work is or someone else's work, you know, it validates that communication, but also like just doing that kind of starts to reprogram your mind about how you think.
Oh, for sure.
Because if you're doing it and you're saying like, oh my gosh, no big deal, like your mind just hears no big deal. And it just goes with that. And it's just, you know, and then you're back in that imposter syndrome. Like, you know, this wasn't even mine.
Right.
You know, it wasn't even mine to have.
No, absolutely. And that's interesting. And it's a good reminder, I think, to us to make sure that we are giving good feedback to people when they do good stuff, or when you have, you know, like a good connection. I've been really focused on connection in my life lately. You know, I feel like we talked about this at the energy retreat too, but you know, a lot of stuff I think says, or what we kind of know to be true about like happiness and fulfillment in life is you really need purpose, right? And you need connection.
Right.
And I feel good on my purpose piece. I feel really good about that most of the time, but the connection piece is something that I feel like has always been a struggle for me. But I think just really like honoring the opportunities we are given for connection, and one, being able to, like you just talked about, being able to let down our own barriers to accept that connection when it is given to us, but also being brave enough and vulnerable enough to open up those channels of connection with someone else.
Right.
You know, that's what I've recognized. You know, there have been some people that I never expected would reach out to us about the podcast and had said just like such thoughtful things that like made my heart like feel like it was going to burst right out of my chest, right? It was so sweet. But it's like, man, Joe, like what? I think I'm missing some opportunities, you know, to give that connection to someone else. And so I've really been trying to be mindful about that. One, to lean in when somebody offers that to me, and two, to just take the time out of my day to like really validate when somebody did a great job, like navigating a tough situation in a meeting, right? When somebody like went over and above and beyond for a client, to like give, not just be like, hey, great job on that case, but to like really name what they did.
Right.
And I think that too is powerful, because when you think about what's the most important in the grand scheme of life, it's not answering the email, you know, within 20 minutes of receiving it. It's like looking at the people on your team, looking at the colleagues, looking at the people you're in the trenches with every day, and really, you know, building them up and bolstering them so they can continue to do the work that they're doing.
Right.
So that's something that I've really just in the last couple weeks have been thinking about. I was at a wedding last night where I saw a lot of people that I hadn't seen like since high school, which, you know, I'm not like a spring chicken. Like that was like 15 years ago, right? Probably more, 16 years ago. I haven't seen these people, and just getting to like catch up and connect with them was so cool. And I thought this morning, I'm like, you know what? Like I'm going to reach out on Facebook and send a message. Not because I'm like, you know, let's be best friends, let's get happy hour, let's get coffee, but just to be like, how cool.
Right.
You know, to see you and to connect with you. And to me, that really is what a lot of life is about, is just like leaning into those moments of connection. Because not only do I think it builds the other person up, it helps like strengthen you and your core and who you are as well. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I think we've talked about, you know, imposter syndrome, and how, you know, some of the ways that we've worked to overcome it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, building that internal strength. I always tell people, like, come up with something you can tell yourself when you're getting into, you know, the mind tornado, right? So, you know, your mind starts swirling and you're like, I'm in my head, and I don't have, you know, all the external resources that we put in place, all of the good external resources, our therapist, our friends, our, you know, our journaling, all of that kind of stuff that we can use when we're, you know, kind of like trying to work through something. But in that moment, you have to have something. You have to have something to, you know, recenter, to kind of pull yourself back out of that, so you don't get too far down the hole, right? So I always tell people, I'm like, come up with a mantra. Come up with something that you plan to tell yourself every single time.
Okay.
To remind yourself, like, no, I'm fine. I'm worthy. Right? And maybe it is. Maybe it's I'm worthy. Maybe it's I'm good enough. Maybe it is, you know, this will pass, right?
Yes.
This feeling will pass.
This too shall pass, yes.
You know, my mantra for a very long time has been, my journey is guided. And that means so many different things to me on so many different levels. And so I know, like, when I'm in the mind spiral, I can say to myself, my journey is guided, and know that what I am dealing with right now is part of the journey forward to my highest good. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, we can just move through this, because I don't have to like stay in this mind spiral, because this is just one of the steps along the journey, and I can move on. Right.
It's an opportunity for growth, I think, too. I say kind of, I think similar to yours, is like the universe is unfolding as it should.
Right.
What's meant to be will be. So even if, you know, the imposter syndrome kicks in, I'm getting ready to, I don't know, give a presentation, right? Or lead a meeting, or like go do a big ask with somebody who has like a lot more, you know, perceived power than I do. Because I think what I'm always afraid of is like, what if they say no? What if they tell me I can't have this? I'm not good enough to get what I'm asking for, right? What if they paid this money to have me present, and at the end they're like, this bitch is stupid, and like this presentation sucks. You know, we give us our money back, or even worse than give us our money back, like we're going to tell everybody that like you suck and aren't worth it. You know, but then it's like, if you believe that the journey is guided, if you believe that you are worthy, if you believe that the universe is unfolding as it should, then even if all of those bad things happen, even if they say, your presentation sucked, Jill, you're terrible at your job, right? Like why would you ever think we would give you that grant, right? Well, clearly I needed that.
Right.
For my higher good.
Right.
For my growth. For my journey. Because I do at my very core, finally, thank God, I got here. I believe that the universe unfolds as it should.
Right.
And how could I ever think? Sometimes I say that to myself, like, Jill, how could you ever think that your life was going to be perfect from beginning to end? How could you ever? And I did, you guys, I did. I believed. I'm like, things are falling apart. Like, that means I fucked up. No, things are falling apart because you have a life, because you can't go 80 years without with something bad never happening. And so I think that helps me, okay, the universe is unfolding as it should. The other thing I say all the time is life is a long game, right? Like this moment in time, like this meeting where I felt embarrassed, where I felt not good enough, where I lost my cool. The good news, I probably won't remember it in 5 days, much less 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years, So I think, yes, those mantras are important because they get you out of the spiral.
Yeah. And they take you to a higher perspective of your life.
Yes, you zoom out.
Because it's like, let me, I'm down here in the shit, right? and the mind's going, and I see the people, and it's like, certainly everything is, terrible that I'm thinking is going to happen to me. But if you can zoom out for a second, and you can look down, and you see that it is only, this big, right? Like what you're dealing with,
the whole universe,
it is only this big. You're just like, oh. Well, I just got to get through that little thing because what's on the other side of it is better, right?
Yes.
Like I just got to get through that. And I can remember, and probably people that have known me a long time are keenly aware that I used to hate public speaking. It used to terrify me. Oh my gosh. It happens now and I don't really know why, but because I'm never really super embarrassed or whatever, but I would get real flush, up my neck. But I would get to a place where it was I could say 5 words and then to the point that there were times where my voice would tremble I was going to cry.
Yes.
And I remember that, and I remember being embarrassed by it, right? Because why am I having this physical reaction,
right,
to speaking? And I can remember that, but the thing is every time that happened, I learned something different about myself and how to navigate those situations.
Yes.
And through that, I learned things like, Amber, do not write down everything that you plan to say and carry it with you to say it, because you are going to stumble. You're going to read it and you're going to stumble. You're going to mispronounce something. You're going to skip over a line because your eyes aren't so great. And, and then you're going to make yourself even more nervous. And I learned through that no, Amber, the way that you deliver is you come with some bullet points. And you just go.
Right.
Right? And so, but I would never have learned that had I not had the opportunity to be so embarrassed and so uncomfortable and all of those things and move through it.
And to get through it. Well, and I think, one, what a perfect example of you did have times in public speaking where you looked red and trembled and people are like, what is going on with this girl, right? Yeah. And, you've had times where you've messed up, but now, like you said, you learn from those and just very practically, got the skills and ability you needed to overcome that and succeed in it. And I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think I used to always struggle with public speaking as well, right? There was a time I got an award a couple years ago and they made me give a 2-minute speech. And this is already after we were doing some of this work, where I was presenting, but it was super fancy people. It was a very, there were a lot of people. It was a nice event. It was a nice venue. And I think, yes, it was that. And I mean, I couldn't eat before. Like, I had like these horrible visions that I was like going to fall down and like fall on my face and like trip up the podium. I was going to knock something over. They were handing me an award. I'm like, what if I drop it? Like, what am I even talking about? Right? All of this
My
panic.
hands will stop working.
I'm like, I mean, what if my hands are sweaty? You know, all of these just like minute fears just swirling in my head. But I think about that now, and I think about all those times I felt that way. And that back then, my entire like being and worthiness hinged upon the approval of others. Yeah. And so I think it was scary to me because it's like, this is a room full of 500 people. And if they don't think I'm good enough, then I am nothing. And now, you know, hopefully I'll get another fancy award someday, maybe not. But if I do go give another speech, I know now that like, even if not one of those 500 people think that I am good enough, if they think my speech sucked, if they're like, why did this girl win the award? I'm still going to be okay. Yeah. Because like my okayness, right? My worthiness is now focused inward instead of outward. Mm-hmm. And what like that's been such a shift for me as well. And I think that's why, you know, everything is duality, right? Like you have to have the hard stuff so you can learn the skills, like what you're talking about. And you have to do the work so that you can continually like get stronger to actually be able to utilize those skills in a meaningful way. Yeah. Yeah.
Whew. So much learning.
That is so much learning.
So much learning. And it's still hard. I mean, because we're still faced with new things, right? Yes. And it goes back to when you put me in a new situation with new people and I don't feel safe with those people, what am I going to do, you know, to kind of pull myself out of that imposter syndrome? Because, you know, I think those are the times, you know, I think when you're very early in your career, early in a relationship, early in a group of people, you know, early on in anything, you know, that imposter syndrome is more prevalent, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have as many experiences to like build off of, I guess. You know, you're like, you know, certainly like I just graduated and I got my license and I'm out there working and you're like, certainly I shouldn't be doing this. Like who allowed me to do this? Like, you know, I mean, there's a lot of that going on, right? Yes. And it happens more often because you're still new to the situation. Yes. But, you know, as you start to hone your skills, you probably get a little bit more like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. But then it like kind of morphs into, well, now I'm in a different situation with different people. Do they know that I'm good enough?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that as you continue to get good, I mean, you continue to level up in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, yeah, I mean, you continually build. So you're continually faced with new experiences, new people. And if you're growing in your career and in your life, probably you're going to be surrounded by people that, you know, feel like more impressive or have higher positions, right? Or who are a little tougher and a little meaner, you know, I think. So yeah, absolutely. You have to constantly adapt. But to your point, like the longer you've been a human, alive and working, you're going to mess up. Right. I used to literally think I'd never mess up. Like I used to like literally think that I know, right? I'm like, some people struggle with imposter syndrome. I struggle with just straight like delusional thinking, I guess. But I really I believed that if I just controlled everything and I was perfect and I kept everything tip-top shape, you know what I mean, and tight, that like I could, you know, I might mess up a little bit, but I'd be able to like cover it up, right? And people would be like, Jill executes everything perfectly every single time, but that's not life. So I think the more you work, the more you mess up, you get humbled, you get knocked on your ass, right? And then you realize like, oh, I messed up and I'm fine, right? Like I'm still okay. Yeah. And I think that's the big piece of it too. Like, you know, what do they say? The higher you are, the harder the fall. Like, let me fall more often, less, you know, from less high. Right. And own that. And I think, again, too, when we speak to that leadership piece, is normalize that. I try to now with my team, when I miss something or I mess up something, one, I own it, right? To anybody who witnessed it happen. I say, like, you know, I missed that email, or like I didn't prioritize this case the way that I should have. I didn't rope in the person that I needed to rope in on this. And therefore X, Y, and Z happened. Right. One, like own your role in the mess up, but also be like, but that's okay.
Right.
And I'm, and maybe things didn't shake out the way we wanted to, and maybe my actions played a role in that. But that doesn't mean that I'm a shitty social worker. That doesn't mean I didn't care about our clients or our program.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything except for I'm a human being.
Right.
And sometimes I make mistakes.
Right.
And then you allow, you know what I mean? That you give permission to everyone else to do that.
Right.
And I think it's, one thing I've seen just in the field and with the array of people I'm in now, is there are certainly offices and programs and groups of people that are unwilling to admit mistakes.
Oh, wow.
And it makes me so mad. And but then I think because sometimes, my team will be like, come on, Jill, like, why do I have to apologize? Like, why do I have to, eat shit, for lack of a better words? Because these people mess up 20 times more than I do, and they never own it. And I say, because we have to model good behavior.
Right.
Because maybe if we eat shit 7,500 times, they'll be like, wow, perhaps this is a more effective way to communicate and engage and partner with people. Yeah. But man, nothing burns my ass than people that won't admit when they mess up.
And I think too, I've worked in many organizations, and I've seen a lot of organizations run, and I know you have too. And I think that sometimes that not admitting, sometimes it does come from a place of like, I just can't. Like I can't admit that I could have done something wrong, or I have to pretend like I didn't. But I think some of that comes from the leadership, right? Yes. Like if I tell this other person that I missed something, then on the back end, I'm going to get written up. I'm going to get in trouble. I lose my job, those types of things. And I think as leaders, like you said, we have to give our teams permission to say, I messed up.
Yes.
And it be okay. Now, I can hear in the back of my head a bunch of different leaders that I've worked for and known and said, I cannot give my staff permission to mess up, because then they will just think that they don't have to do anything, and they will mess up all the time, and then we will have no workforce, and we'll get sued everywhere and whatever, right? and I get it. I hear you, but also, let's get out of the fear tornado in your head.
Yes.
Because that is not how human beings work. That does not make any good sense. You may have employees who have performance issues, and you know exactly who they are. Mm-hmm. You know exactly who they are, and you will deal with them accordingly.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
If you give all of your employees the leeway to say, oh, shit, I didn't do that, and they can come to their supervisor and admit that, and you can work through how to correct it, that is not permission to do poorly at your job. No. That is permission to exist as a human being. And we should all be giving each other permission to exist as a human being. And actually, no one should ever have to ask for permission to exist as a human being. We should honor that in every single space that we exist in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And honor and love people knowing that they will mess up, that they will disappoint you, And that, I think, goes back almost full circle to what you were talking about at the beginning. I would hope that if you are surrounded by, a boss and coworkers that participate in a culture that says, obviously we try our best, right? Obviously we hustle. Obviously we are creative in our solutions and the work that we're doing, but we recognize that sometimes we will fall short. Because we mess up. Sometimes we'll fall short because the systems at play make it impossible for us to achieve it. Then hopefully, that would allow some of that imposter syndrome to fade away.
Right.
Because if I am showing up who I am, flawed as I may be, and giving it my best effort, that is all that is asked of me, and that is all that I need to do.
Right.
But I mean, just this belief that, like, admitting that you dropped the ball on something is a form of weakness. No, I mean, it's a sign of emotional immaturity, honestly, is what it is. And I work now in the criminal justice system, and, we know all about, the prison industrial complex and everything else. Like, I mean, the churn of clients is insane.
Right.
When you're moving, I mean, we move thousands of clients through our program a year. Obviously, we're going to drop the ball.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to not, make calls as quickly as we should have.
Right.
Obviously, we're going to forget to send an email. You know what I mean? And I think people who work really in any industry right now, like the volume of work is high.
Yes.
And so if you can just, let go of that expectation that I have to do everything perfectly or else,
right.
I suck at my job. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where some of that burnout and that stress and that anxiety comes from. But we have to think about that. We should take this conversation because we're going to do some stuff on leadership, I think, in this podcast. And we need to talk about that too, about space for being human.
Yeah. And I think when you allow people to have space to be human, when you allow people to have that space in your workplace to make mistakes, what they learn how to do through that is not only to just, to be a well-rounded, good human, right?
With some emotional intelligence and compassion and empathy.
And, a good worker that probably isn't going to leave because they're not burnt out and they feel valued and they feel loved in their work. But what you're also creating is someone who learns how to prioritize what is most important in your workplace for your clients. Because here's the thing, there are things that I can miss, right? I could miss an email. I could miss a meeting. I could miss doing a PHQ-9 screening. I mean, there are different levels of things that I can miss doing, right? And if I know that, if I miss this email, I'm going to try not to miss the emails, but I'm going to prioritize the higher level things that are life or death.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But if everything is the same if the consequence is the same for everything in my workplace, I don't have any ability at that point in time to prioritize. If I can't do everything, I don't have any ability to prioritize what really needs to be done.
Yes, because I am so afraid of missing even the most minute, inconsequential thing.
Yes.
Because I am in a fear-based culture where if I mess up one thing, then you're stifling creativity. You're stifling problem solving. You're taking away all that. Yes.
And you're creating as a supervisor, it's either going to be that, your employees won't be able to prioritize one thing over the other because everything is the same consequence. However, what also ends up happening is they're running to your door every day I don't think I can get this done. Is it okay? I don't think I can get this done. Is it okay? And it's as supervisors, we have a lot of work to do too. And I don't need to problem solve whether you send this email today or tomorrow.
Right. And they do that. They either come at you 100 times over because they're just in an absolute anxiety spiral, or they dissociate, check out, and everything falls apart, and avoid you and avoid their clients and everything else. Let me have my staff member come to me every day and say, Jill, I can't take any more clients this week. Jill, I know we have that training that you wanted us to go to, but I'm behind on X, Y, and Z, and I can't make it, right? And my team does say that to me, right? Because they know, and I think we make it clear, what the priorities are. And no, my supervisor, she would come to me sometimes and she'd be like, stop referrals, stop. You know what I mean? And it sucks, and part of me is like, oh my God, if we stop referrals, then nobody's going to think they're going to think we can't handle our program, right? And they're going to take all our money and you know what I mean? And they're going to be like, Jill sucks and all this stuff. But it's no, you know what I mean? You have to prioritize what's important, and you have to believe that if everyone is here showing up as their authentic selves and trying their hardest, that's good enough. That's it. If we wake up every day and we are honest with each other and kind to each other and kind to our clients and strong advocates and we try our best, then that's enough. It's enough. And I think you got to think sometimes you got to place value on that input as well as the output. Right. Because we're so often focused on the output and not on the input. Yeah. But I think because Jill 5 years ago, if she would have come to me and been like, we have to stop referrals, I'd be like, they got to suck it up. You know what I mean? They got to figure it out.
Yeah.
We can't stop referrals.
Right.
Because what will this person say or that person say? Or all of these people that, if they don't think I'm doing good enough, then I am nothing, right? But now it's like we talked about before, that orientation flip, right? Well, so-and-so can scream and yell and carry on and throw a tantrum.
Right.
But it is what it is.
Right.
Because my worth and my work and my passion lives in me. It is not dependent on the rest of you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So were there other pieces of imposter syndrome that you wanted to go through that you experienced maybe a little bit differently than?
Well, so I think we've hit on I think people and environment can impact imposter syndrome. Right. I think we've talked about the importance of building ourselves up internally and recognizing that humans do mess up. Right. So even if you are a human that messes up, which I, would wager that everyone who's listening to this podcast is a human who messes up.
But if you're not, if you could reach out, I haven't had a lot of alien contact and I would enjoy that.
If you are an alien that does not mess up, we would love to have you on our next podcast.
An extraterrestrial. I think that's what we're, is that where?
Oh, we're not supposed to.
No, artificial intelligence.
No, artificial intelligence is like the computer.
I don't know what it's called.
We don't know what it's called.
But if you are not of this world and you would like to reach out, please do so.
And if you have never messed
up. At info@thirdwheel.com.
We would love to hear from you. So I think recognizing that you are a human that will mess up and that is okay, is a huge piece of it. And I think sometimes too, just like owning, like verbalizing when you're feeling the imposter syndrome. I've done that before too, like let me go to my boss, let me go to my colleague and be like, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I'm a little bit out of my wheelhouse and asking for help when you need it.
Right.
I've been in the position of building a lot of programs. So sometimes I do come across things where I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Like this is an imposter syndrome. Like I just straight up don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
But being brave enough to ask for help there. Because I think that's what you have to ask yourself too. If you're starting to feel that way, maybe it's not, like maybe you've done a lot of your work, right? Maybe you just don't have the tools and knowledge to do what you've been asked to do.
Right.
And that's a whole different conundrum, right? That's a whole different problem. But I think that same emotional intelligence piece that allows me to ask for help when I need it, that allows me to say, hey, this is out of my scope and I don't understand it. Can someone please help me? I think you have to evaluate that piece as well.
I think that's kind of imposter syndrome too, because we get into a place where we're like, okay, well, I've been assigned this thing to do, right? So I am going to do it. Oh shit, I don't know. Let me Google this and try to figure it out, instead of I know that the person 3 doors down the hall has the answer to this, but my God, I'm not going to go ask them because then they'll know that I don't know.
Oh, gosh, man, Amber, yes. So the reason you wouldn't ask for help is because you're still crippled by the imposter syndrome. Because if I admit that I don't know how to do this, then I don't deserve this job, deserve this role, deserve this project.
Right.
Etc.
But really, I mean, at the end of the day, especially in the workplace, when somebody asks you to do something, they are asking you to do it because A, they think you have the majority of the knowledge you need.
Sure.
And B, they know you have the connections to get the rest of the information. You're smart enough to get it.
Yes.
And so, but we forget about that B. We're like, no, they thought that my brain could put all this together. Right.
No, that is a big piece of it too. And it does. It just comes. But I think it really boils down to what we've talked about. That I have to believe that I'm okay despite my imperfections.
Right.
Despite the things that I don't know. Despite the mistakes I made. And then the rest is,
Right.
And believe that what's meant to be will be.
Right.
That, if I go to my boss and I say, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Hey, I don't know how to do this. And our worst fear comes true. And they're like, well, then you don't deserve this job. Right? And off you go.
Then you say thank you.
Then you say thank you and you believe. The universe is unfolding as it should.
Yeah, because you needed a different job. And there probably were 1,000 other red flags that you did not pay attention to before that last one.
Before that happened. Yeah, that feels like a strange escalation. But I think sometimes I have to do that for my own anxiety. I play that out to the end sometimes. What are you really afraid of, Jill? what are you really afraid is going to happen here?
Right.
Let's say you go up to give that speech and you like catapult and you like fall on your face and you like knock something over, you like drop the, the fuck word in the middle of your speech accidentally, like play it to the end and you're still fine.
Yes.
Like you're still okay. So I think, that's a big piece of it too, is just like play the story to the end and I bet you'll still be all right. That word, because we talked about this in the last one. The things that we thought we could never handle are the things that wiped the slate clean and gave us the opportunity to grow and stretch in ways that we never imagined that we would.
And I want to take a second, it's just as you were talking, I kept hearing co-creation and how much of a role co-creation plays as we are sometimes moving through this imposter syndrome, because the co-creation being, I can do my own internal work and build myself up, but in order to achieve things in the outside world, in order to achieve things that I want, a lot of times I have to co-create. And if I can't be open to connecting with other people out of fear, out of imposter syndrome, they're going to think that I'm not good enough, that they're not going to want to interact with me because I'm not good enough. If we're not willing to co-create, that sometimes stifles our ability to move forward as well.
Yes.
And I think that's probably like a whole different topic, but I just wanted to bring that up in the sense of imposter syndrome, because you were talking about like, if I don't have the answers, I need to go ask someone, right? Yes. And not having the fear of that co-creation. Because in general, if I would bet that if you go back and you look through your life at the things that you're most proud of, the things that you have overcome, the things that you have built for yourself in your life, those have not necessarily been completely independent. No. Your internal work might have been somewhat independent because you chose to do it for yourself. But there were other people along the way that helped you, that provided you with some guidance or some support or some validation or whatever the case may be to get you through. And so just making sure that you're staying open to that co-creation, I think, is so important as we're moving through these journeys of life and we're moving through these times where we're feeling less than or not worthy.
Absolutely. No, and I believe to my core, and I say this a lot if you know me, healing happens only in connection.
Yes.
And imposter syndrome is a symptom of something that is not healed.
Right.
And we have to have authentic connection to continue to heal. And what you're talking about with co-creation is authentic connection, right? Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, but all vulnerability means is letting down that wall that we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast to allow for positive feedback, to allow for critical feedback, to show up authentically and say, hey, can you help me out with this? Or, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today. Or, hey, these are the thoughts I'm having. And we have to identify which people are safe to do that with. Right. And sometimes we have to make ourselves the safe person to do that with. And what I found too, I do with the supervision work that I do, I mentor a lot of social workers, but that is certainly not a one-way relationship, right? By making myself a safe person for them, I ought to, 9 times out of 10, they become a safe person for me too.
Right.
And I think that is an important thing too, that if I don't feel like I can go to my boss, if I don't feel like I can go to my coworkers, right? Like maybe there's people that are listening to this that are like, no, my work is not a safe place, right? To be vulnerable, to share that I'm feeling overwhelmed, to share that I need help, to share that I have these imposter syndrome feelings. Well, who else can you reach out to, laterally, right? To just name that. And because everything we think in our heads is 1,000 times scarier than what will actually come out of our mouth when we share it with somebody else. Right. So I think we have to think about that too, that sometimes in that co-creation vein, we have to open up the channel of healing if somebody isn't going to provide that for us.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Whew.
That was a lot.
That was a lot. I hope we hit on all the imposter syndrome stuff. I think it definitely ties into what we've talked about worthiness and things like that. And I think there's probably more to unpack there.
Yeah.
But if we forgot something, which God knows we did, because we are humans and we make mistakes, which is the point of the whole podcast.
So please honor our humanness.
Please, honor our humanness. And please give us some critical feedback and let us know what we forgot. Because the good news is we'll be coming at you every other week for the foreseeable future so we can hit it again, and would love to hear your guys' thoughts and ways that you have overcome imposter syndrome, because then we can share it for everyone to listen to and hear.
Yeah. You want to pull a card?
Let's pull a card. I brought moon cards. What cards do you have?
I've got a lot of cards. I think I'm just going to go straight up tarot.
You going to pull a tarot card for everybody?
I think I'm going to pull a tarot card.
I'm going to pull a moon card. I will tell you the moon card I pull more than any card ever. And I get so annoyed now when I pull it. I'm like, oh, shocking. It's the card and it says you are good enough. Oh,
it's so
I'm
nice.
like, shut up, moon cards. No, I'm not. No, I'm just kidding.
So I'm pulling from the Lightseers Tarot. That is the deck that I am using today, and yours is
Moonology. Can we link the cards in the?
Yeah, we'll take a picture of them, and we can I don't know how it works, but I'll get it in there.
Somehow we'll get it on there. If not, we'll put it on.
It'll be on
the socials.
We
we can't figure out,
we will load it on the gram.
We'll put it on the gram. That I do know how to work, so we can do that. All right.
So hopefully this is not the first deep breath you've taken in the last 2 weeks. But if it is, take one with us as we ground down. All right. You want to pull first? You want me to pull first?
Let me
pull
see.
at the
Let's
same
see
time.
what pops. Let's just see what pops out.
Let's see how
for
we
us.
come out here. Oh, you do yours the same way I do.
Well, probably because I copy you.
Oh.
Probably because I just do whatever you do. I pulled full moon in Leo, which I am a Leo.
Oh.
Which I do pull the Leo cards a lot. And it says, don't let pride get in your way.
Ooh.
It's almost like that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
The whole time. Be vulnerable.
Don't let pride get in your way. So that, being I'm thinking about it kind of as oh my gosh, my cards are being so wild. We are not doing 4 tarot cards. Thank you. We just want one, please.
But yeah, don't let pride get in your way. Don't let pride get in the way of authentic connection is how I think of it.
Right.
You know who you are, and the person is going to love who you are, so just be vulnerable. Don't let pride get in the way. What did you pull?
I got the Ace of Wands.
Ooh.
So aces, if you don't know anything about the tarot, aces are beginning cards. Wand cards are about creativity and fiery energy. But when we look at this card, and you'll be able to see it wherever we put it, the fire is actually in her head. The fire is actually there at her thinking and her third eye and where she is getting that inspiration. So it is still that creativity that you've got internally, that fire internally. It's that very first spark where you're like, oh, I got an idea, right? And so I think as we are talking about this with the imposter syndrome and whatnot, we are changing that spark. Right? We are changing that spark of creativity from the spark of oh my gosh, I'm not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. To maybe I am.
Maybe I am.
Maybe I am. Maybe I can come up with creative ways to help myself move through this and out of this thought process, right?
Yes. And to me, when I look at that card, it's all the power I need is already inside of me.
Oh, yeah.
All the power I need is inside of me.
Yeah. Because she's got all of those. It's there's all of these, you'll be able to see it, but there's all of these lights, strings of lights that aren't lit yet, but she's got the middle light ready to light everything up.
Right. And she's just got to get her energy right.
Yep.
And let it out.
Mm-hmm.
No, because everything she has is inside of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. Ooh. So good. All right, guys. Well, we'll snap a pic of the cards.
Mm-hmm.
We already asked for your feedback, so send that if you got it.
Oh, let's talk about real quick, just kind of some things that we've been hearing. We do have a website. Hopefully you've looked at it, just Third Wheel LLC.
www.thirdwheelllc. So that's 3 L's in a row.
Yes.
thirdwheelllc.com.
Yes.
But if you Google it, Third Wheel Consulting, we're the first thing that pops up on Google.
So if you ever want to work with Jill or I, if you've been listening to these podcasts and you're like, look, I need to like get in with these ladies, go take a look and see what our offerings are. We've got different trainings. We do consult with different organizations, and we can consult on like a whole host of things, like, whether that is reworking like leadership and leadership type training. If you are building a program, if you are moving into a new phase of your organization and just want help on how are we going to move through this and keep our culture good, or you want to rebuild culture within your organization, or if you're like, I've got this project, I don't know if it fits those things, just send us something and let us know, and we'll let you know if we can do it. If we can't do it, we might be able to find somebody that can help you out. You do supervision for people who are getting their independent license.
I do.
Right?
Yep.
I am doing, I'm a Reiki practitioner. So if you're ever interested in doing Reiki, you can book with me on that website. I also do tarot and oracle card guidance sessions, which have been picking up here recently.
Yes.
Like crazy. I do most of those virtually. So if you're like, I live somewhere far away from you, Amber, no worries. We do those generally over the computer. Mm-hmm. I also do individual self-care sessions with people. So like if you are working on, you need help kind of creating your self-care practice or moving through different transitions in your life, and you want some guidance and some help with that, I do have those sessions available as well, one-on-one. And then we will be opening up a new self-care group at least at the beginning of the year, and keep look through the beginning of the year, like at the end of December, because we are going to be launching quite a few different things.
Yes, we're going to do like a little kind of, I think, challenge to help people start the year right. We do have the energy retreat coming up.
Yes.
And then we have a lot too. We do a lot of individual work with people and businesses, but we have a lot of pre-recorded trainings as well that hit on a lot of the themes I think we talk about. If you're a counselor or a social worker in the state of Ohio, they're all CEU eligible.
Yes.
And I think pretty affordable in terms of online training. So check out our website, reach out to us, and we would love to begin to connect with you guys more outside of here.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. We would be honored if you would like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, be well.